Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Normally when you're invited to Muslim gatherings, you kind of think to yourself, what is it that I'm allowed to say and what is it that I'm not allowed to say? What are the parameters? I just want to say, Hanif, I properly rate you, bruv, okay, for your critique. And it's not a critique that's necessarily for, bringing people down, but it's about giving encouragement to this community and for us to realize the duty that we have to our neighbors. And you've certainly made it a lot easier for me then to talk. I want to use this opportunity really to talk about the subject of poverty in the UK. As director of a Muslim charity and engaging with Muslim donors on a day-to-day basis, I'm often asked a question that seems to make no sense to me. I'm often asked, is there such a thing as poverty in the UK? As Muslim communities with strong links back home, across the Middle East, Southeast Asia, in the Indian subcontinent and Africa, we're very familiar with what poverty looks like. And certainly when it comes to media images of poverty, of famine, of tragedy, of war, we have accustomed ourselves in such a way that we have a certain image of what poverty should look like. And yet when we try and translate those images here in the UK, it doesn't quite fit. So when we speak of poverty in the UK, for many Muslims, they look back at the images that they're so familiar with back home and can't seem to apply those same images to the context of the UK. And I think that's part of the problem that we face. Poverty doesn't need to look like a certain thing. Certain images of poverty are not the only way poverty can manifest in our communities. Poverty is different in different cultural contexts in different countries. I'm told that we have a welfare system in this country that provides for everyone. Yet how do we explain the fact that every night over 750,000 children in this country will often go to bed hungry? How do we explain the fact that every 15 minutes an individual or a family is made homeless? How do we reconcile these tragic statistics with the kind of reality that we see on our doorstep? The reality is that the welfare state that we live in today is unable to deal with every single social problem that manifests. The welfare system is full of gaps. It isn't a solution. What we must realize today is that it is merely a token contribution towards a need in society. When Prime Minister David Cameron was asked in Parliament about poverty in the UK, he made an assumption and said that we shouldn't compare poverty to the developing world. He said it isn't as simple in this country as situations where children who are utterly impoverished are living on less than $1 a day or £1 a day. But the sad reality is that that's not a situation that is only applicable to the developing world. It is a reality today in our own communities. There are families and individuals living on less than £1 a day. Let's take some practical examples. I was dealing with a case of an asylum seeker who came to the UK fleeing the civil war in Syria. And whilst his country welcomed him as a refuge from the war, whilst his asylum case is dealt with by the Home Office, he is provided with £35, sometimes £30, depending on the circumstance, in the form of credit for him to use to buy food. Now, £35 may be quite generous to live on when it's just a question of buying food. But of course, life is more than just providing, than just eating. There is more expense in life so that we can maintain a dignified lifestyle. There is no cash for this asylum seeker, only these vouchers to the value of £30 or £35. In terms of accommodation, that asylum seeker will probably be provided with a hostel, sharing the space with alcoholics and drug addicts, not the kind of place that you would want your sister to be living after she has fled conflict. And he has to live on this £30 a week. Now, of course, because it's in vouchers, he needs to be able to convert that into cash. So what he will have to do is take that £30 in vouchers and go onto the streets of London and exchange that or barter that £30 in credit to £15 in cash. And the reason why he needs this cash is because as part of his obligation as an asylum seeker, he has to sign up at the Home Office on a weekly basis. The particular asylum seeker that I was working with lived in Croydon or was provided with accommodation in South London. And he was required to sign on in Ilford. Now, to get from Croydon to Ilford, you at least need to use public transport. It's not just like a walk to the corner shop. Yet how much does a travel card cost today? Maybe about £8? Something along the lines of £8? So that £15, after paying for that travel card, becomes £7. £7 in cash. And then we ask ourselves whether people live on just £1 a day in this country. £7 for 7 days. There are so many other social groups that find themselves in this situation. Take, for example, an ex-offender who has been released from prison. When an ex-offender is released from prison, he is given £50 as a discharge grant. The first thing he does when he leaves prison is to sign up at the job centre for benefits. Those benefits will not come through straight away. They will take 3 to 4 weeks at least to be processed. For those 3 to 4 weeks, that ex-offender will live on £50. That is supposed to cover accommodation, that is supposed to cover food, that is supposed to cover all those necessities that that individual needs. Often when ex-offenders leave prison after, let's say, a 5-year sentence, they find that the clothes that they were wearing 5 years ago no longer fit. Or they went into prison during the summer wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and they're released in December when it's freezing cold. £50 to buy clothes, to eat for 4 weeks, and shelter as well. And if we judge these two social groups, the refugees and asylum seekers, the ex-offenders who've committed crime, then let's think about a far more down-to-earth, a far more general case. Someone who is 24 years old and a graduate, has worked hard at university, hoping that his degree will lead him into employment. But it's not as simple as that, as we all know. He will receive JSA, which would equate to £56.80 for a week. Housing may be covered by housing benefit, but there will be a service charge to cover. So his weekly fee to his hostel will be about £5. He needs to get a job, so he needs to buy credit for his mobile phone. Let's say that costs about £10. He needs to travel into central London to go to interviews. Let's say 3 days a week. Times 8, £24. He needs to go to the laundrette to wash his clothes. £4. That leaves him with £13. That doesn't even buy a 2-for-2 meal at Sam's every day of the week. Now we assume when we think about job seekers allowance, it's a generous offer in the context where you have a family there who can look after you. If you can go and stay with mummy and daddy, then it may not be so difficult. If mummy is going to wash your clothes and provide you with food, then maybe £56 is okay. It's your pocket expenses for that week. But when you actually have to live on £56.80 on a weekly basis, life is actually impossible. This is the welfare state for so many individuals. Yes, the Daily Mail will portray stories of excess when it comes to benefits. And maybe there are some situations where people's lives are fully catered for by the benefit system. But the sheer reality is that for some people, it just simply isn't enough. No longer can we assume that the government will take care of them. No longer can we assume that everyone in this country is looked after. No longer can we assume that we as a society need to do nothing to look after those who are vulnerable. We also live in a time where this welfare system is being curtailed. It's being cut back. Universal credit in the London borough of Brent will mean that 2,000 families will have to leave their homes. Thank goodness the system isn't working. Thank goodness the government is realizing that their computer systems can't manage the universal benefit. Maybe they'll have some reprieve for a few more months. But where are these families going to go afterwards? The bedroom tax. If you have an extra room in your house that's not being lived in, and it's council property, you have to pay a tax on it. Let's say you want to move. Let's say you want to move to a smaller house so that you don't have an empty living space in your home. You go on the council register. It might take you 2 years to find the right property that's got just the right number of rooms. For those 2 years, you still have to pay bedroom tax. What kind of a welfare system is this? And everywhere around the country, food banks are opening. Everywhere around the country. Almost every town, every borough has a food bank today. If people were not hungry, why are these food banks appearing? If people were not starving, why has every town got a food bank today? Imagine the humiliation of having to stand in a queue, waiting for the food bank to open, where you exchange your voucher for a can of beans, maybe a can of fruit. That's it. This is a reality here in the UK, one that we cannot ignore, one where we have a duty and an obligation. I obviously represent al-Mizan Charitable Trust, and I just want to say a few words about the work that we do. We are a grant funder that supports individuals who are in crisis or in financial hardship. The nature of our work is that we reach out to these individuals who are in financial difficulty and offer small grants and interest-free loans of up to £500, making small investments in people's lives so they can get back onto their feet. If there's a funeral in the family, suddenly a £3,000 bill appears. How are you supposed to pay for that on benefits? It is each of our responsibility to fulfill the needs of our neighbors, our communities. And the last question that people often ask me when I introduce to them al-Mizan Charitable Trust is, do you just give to Muslims? The answer is no. Over 80% of our beneficiaries who receive grants and interest-free loans from us are from outside the Muslim community. Poverty is indiscriminate, so we don't discriminate either. The Prophet was sent as rahmatul lil alameen, as a mercy to all the worlds. It is a shame that we even ask this question. It's a travesty that we entertain the idea that somehow we only have a duty to support our brothers and sisters in faith. Maybe they should get priority then. Maybe we have an obligation to everyone. We have a duty and an obligation to our neighbors. And the idea that we only have a duty to those who share our faith, I believe, is very much against the tenets of the Islam that I follow and the Muslim that I became. I'd like to end with a verse from Quran which means a lot to me and has really inspired my work over the last sort of 12 years in the charity sector. It is a verse from Surah As-Safat, verse number 25, that says, مَا لَكُمْ لَا تَنَاصَرُونَ. What is the matter with you that you do not help each other? And the context of this verse is the day of resurrection, when we will be raised up to account for our deeds. And the question that we will be asked is, مَا لَكُمْ لَا تَنَاصَرُونَ. What is the matter with you that you do not help each other? Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Mm-hmm.